Someone online tells you that you should have 1 times your salary saved by 30, 3 times by 40, 6 times by 50. You do the maths on your own numbers and your stomach drops a little. Here's the problem. That advice was never built for Australia. We have compulsory super. We have HECS debt sitting quietly on top of our pay. We have a property market that has made a national sport out of humbling people. A median Sydney house now sits around $1.76 million. So today, let's throw out the American benchmarks and look at what the numbers actually say for Australians, decade by decade. And if you feel behind after watching this, stick around, because there is a very good chance you are not. Quick disclaimer. This is general information only, not personal financial advice. The figures here come from the Grattan Institute's wealth data, the ASFA Retirement Standard, and ATO tax statistics. Every situation is different, so treat these as a guide, not a verdict on your life. Before we get into ages, a quick reality check on income. Earning more does not automatically make you wealthier if your spending climbs right alongside it. A typical full-time Australian worker earns around $90,400 a year. The median income across all Australian taxpayers sits closer to $55,600. The top 20% of earners take home around $104,000. The top 10% around $143,000. And the top 1% around $375,000. Keep those numbers in your back pocket, because context matters more than most people think. Now, your 20s. This is the foundation decade, and here is the truth nobody says loudly enough. You are technically still a baby adult. This is your first decade of actual adulthood. Nobody has it figured out here, no matter how it looks online. The median super balance in your 20s sits around $18,000. There is no ASFA benchmark worth stressing over at this age, because your 20s were never about hitting a number. They were about building the habits that carry you for the next 60 years. If you don't own a home yet in your 20s, you are in very good, very large company. So, what should you actually focus on here? First, an emergency fund. 3 to 6 months of living expenses, sitting in a high-interest savings account, or an offset account if you've already got a mortgage. Stable income, fewer commitments, 3 months might cover you. More variable income, more responsibilities, lean closer to 6. Second, start investing, even if it's small. Setting aside just 5% of your pay can snowball into something significant, purely because time is doing the heavy lifting for you. The earlier that money goes in, the less effort it needs from you later. Third, check your super is actually invested properly for your age. Under 45, high growth or growth options generally make sense because you have decades to ride out the market's bad days. That usually means 85 to 100% sitting in growth assets like shares and property. From 45 to 55, it's worth shifting toward balanced or conservative growth, closer to 70 to 85% in growth assets. From 55 onward, it's often smart to dial back further, with 50% or more moving into defensive assets like cash and bonds. Your 20s were never about the number. They were about the habits. Next, your 30s, the compounding decade. This is where investing starts to feel genuinely interesting, because this is usually when your income rises. But so does everything else. Rent climbs. Maybe you're saving for a first home. Maybe there are kids in the picture now. Maybe your taste has simply gotten more expensive. The median super balance at 30 sits around $62,000. ASFA's rough benchmark for this age is around $67,000. Zoom out beyond super, and households aged 25 to 40 carry a median net worth of around $238,000. This is the decade where your wealth stops being just a super number and starts becoming savings, investments, maybe home equity too. This is also the decade compound interest starts to feel real. The money you invested in your 20s is finally making its own money. Think of it like a snowball rolling down a hill, tiny at first, barely moving. Then it starts picking up size on its own. Going from zero to your first $100,000 is brutal. The next $100,000 gets easier. The one after that, easier again. Your 30s are about strategy, building assets consistently, keeping more of what you earn, and putting together a long-term wealth plan that actually fits the life you're living, whether that's property, shares, or a mix of both. Now your 40s. This is where momentum builds seriously. By now, you've had more years earning, more years investing, and hopefully some debt paid down along the way. At 40, the median super balance sits around $114,000. ASFA's benchmark for being on track toward a comfortable retirement is closer to $168,000. Zoom out again, and households aged 41 to 64 carry a median net worth of around $809,000. For a lot of people, this is when wealth finally starts to feel tangible, even if a large chunk of it is tied up in property. Your 40s are about keeping that momentum, growing your super, spreading beyond a single asset class, and making sure your long-term plan is actually taking shape, not just sitting as an idea. Then your 50s. Retirement stops being a vague future idea here and starts feeling real, not in a scary way. Plenty of 50-year-olds today have decades of healthy years still ahead. This is the age where the real questions show up. Do you want to fully retire, work part-time, travel, downsize? At 50, the median super balance is around $157,000. ASFA suggests around $296,000 by 50 to stay on track for a comfortable retirement, around $377,000 by 55, and around $496,000 by 60. This is the decade to get serious. Check whether your super is on track. Work out where the gaps sit. A high net worth on paper means very little without flexibility in how you actually use that money. If your 40s were about acceleration, your 50s are about alignment. This is also often the point to shift your super further into conservative territory, somewhere around 50 to 70% in defensive assets, with a smaller slice left in growth. And then retirement. So how much do you actually need? According to ASFA, a comfortable retirement costs around $54,840 a year for a single person, or $77,375 for a couple. To fund that, ASFA suggests you'd need roughly $630,000 in super as a single, or $730,000 as a couple. These figures assume you own your home outright. If renting is part of your retirement plan, adjust accordingly, because that changes the maths significantly. Yes, it sounds like a lot. But by the time you're sitting on that kind of balance, compound interest is doing serious work on your behalf. Add in ongoing employer contributions, and the snowball keeps rolling even as you approach the finish line. Zoom out to overall wealth, and households aged 65 and over carry a median net worth of around $817,000. Again, a large portion of that often sits inside the family home, which is exactly why planning cash flow and flexibility matters so much heading into retirement. Here's something most people don't factor in. The age pension is a genuine safety net. A single person receives around $30,600 a year. Not a luxury lifestyle on its own, but a solid foundation sitting underneath your super and investments. So, no matter which decade you're in right now, here are 3 things worth doing. Track your net worth. It sounds simple, but watching that number move, even slowly, is one of the most motivating things you can do for your own discipline. Track your spending too. Not to punish yourself, but to get clear on where your money is actually going, and whether it's going toward things that genuinely matter to you. And automate your investing wherever you can. Removing the decision removes the friction, and friction is usually what kills consistency. Wherever you land on these numbers, here's the truth. These are benchmarks, not verdicts. Some decades you'll be ahead, some you'll be behind. What matters is the direction you're moving in, not the exact number on any single day. If this helped something click, do me a favour and smash that like. It genuinely helps this reach more Aussies working through the same questions. Subscribe and hit the bell so the next one finds you. See you soon.